And I think it's important. Democrats, we tend to be a little more judgmental than we should be. This notion of cancel culture, you've been living it. You've been on the receiving end of it for years and years and years. That's real. And Democrats need to own up to that. They've got to mature about this.
In a recent appearance on KBLA with radio host Tavis Smiley, comedian and political commentator Bill Maher voiced skepticism about California Governor Gavin Newsom's viability as a future presidential candidate, despite personally supporting the governor's capabilities. While Maher acknowledged Newsom's intelligence and charisma, he relayed that even progressive voices like Smiley expressed doubts about Newsom's electability outside California, particularly in southern or conservative-leaning states. This hesitation stems from Newsom's track record, which many see as too deeply rooted in left-wing policies and controversial governance decisions. Maher explained that in the broader Democratic landscape, Newsom's image might resonate with coastal elites, but not with the heartland voters Democrats need to win. Even within traditionally progressive circles, there's a growing recognition that Newsom's leadership style, centered on optics and ambitious rhetoric, may not translate into the broad coalition needed to secure national office, especially in light of recent state-level turmoil that has damaged his credibility.
Is part of this that voters are so fed up with what they see on the streets of their cities that as a politician, you've got to clean up those streets?
Yeah, well, that's generally the case, but that's not the inspiration for Care Court.
But is there a political factor in this for you?
As an electoral strategy, I'm turned out.
Critics of Governor Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass point to their handling of disasters like the Los Angeles wildfires and recent civil unrest as glaring examples of administrative failure. From delayed responses to chaotic mismanagement, both officials are accused of consistently failing their constituents during times of crisis. Maher, though historically aligned with liberal values, didn't mince words in suggesting that California's so-called progressive leadership has done more harm than good. The video suggests that under Newsom and Bass, the Golden State has spiraled into a hotbed of dysfunction, marked by a surge in homelessness, crime, and an overwhelming sense of lawlessness. As public frustration mounts, residents and commentators alike question why these officials remain in power despite their visible track record of ineffective governance. The failure to act decisively and strategically in moments of public emergency has led many, including high-profile voices, to wonder whether Newsom's continued presence in office serves the people of California, or simply his own political ambitions.
Words, toxic politics. That's what Governor Newsom is calling his own Democratic Party's brand right now.
So let's dive into this. Yes, it's leading to backlash and debate in tonight's Politics at Large. Steve is here on set with how the governor says he wants his own party to change.
Maher, never shy about voicing his disdain for excessive bureaucracy, took particular aim at California's growing thicket of regulations under Newsom's administration, using the example of a recent law mandating gender-neutral toy aisles in department stores with over 500 employees. Maher underscored what he sees as a larger problem, legislation rooted in symbolism over substance. While Newsom defended the law by claiming it was industry-supported and not initiated by his office, Maher framed it as yet another instance of performative governance. This example served as a microcosm of the broader issue, namely that California is drowning in red tape, leaving businesses and residents alike frustrated by micromanagement masquerading as progressivism. Maher argued that instead of focusing on meaningful change, such as addressing housing shortages, decaying infrastructure, or public safety, the state continues to pursue ideologically driven policies that, while headline-grabbing, often do little to address the day-to-day concerns of ordinary Californians. The result, he says, is a bureaucratic nightmare that stifles innovation and progress.
So a lot of the governors around this country do not want Syrian refugees in their state. They've made that plain. If you were the governor right now, what would your position on refugees?
Well, we've been accepting Syrian refugees in California. We have 252 without incident for over the last couple years.
The video then shifts focus to the civil unrest linked to ICE enforcement in California, highlighting Newsom's initial response as dangerously out of touch. Rather than condemning the violence and chaos erupting on the streets, Newsom reportedly chose to grandstand, daring federal officials to arrest him and aligning himself with the protesters. This inflammatory rhetoric, including public statements that framed resistance as heroism, was seen by many, including Maher, as reckless and irresponsible. Instead of working to restore order, Newsom's posturing arguably fanned the flames, casting doubt on his priorities as a leader. In Maher's view, a governor's duty is to protect his constituents and enforce the law, not to provoke confrontations for political gain. The fact that Newsom's initial stance appeared more concerned with antagonizing Trump than addressing public safety sent a troubling message, one that painted him not as a governor in control of his state, but as a political opportunist more interested in theater than governance. When public pressure mounted and bipartisan criticism grew louder, Newsom finally reversed course, delivering a formal apology and promising to hold violent protesters accountable.
That's not the issue. The politics here is compassion. The politics is purpose.
You may be termed out here, but does cleaning up the streets of California factor into a potential presidential run?
I'm never going to overpromise that in the short run. I mean, we are struggling in this state.
You're not answering my question.
Homelessness, no, housing and homelessness.
However, the video argues this shift in tone was motivated less by genuine remorse and more by political survival. 4 to 5 days of silence followed by a carefully worded video statement didn't help Newsom's credibility, and Maher was quick to point out the optics. The apology, though well scripted, was too little, too late. It followed several days of unchecked violence, numerous arrests, and widespread destruction that could have been mitigated with a firmer, more immediate response. Maher and others view this delay as emblematic of Newsom's larger leadership problem, a tendency to react only when public opinion demands it, rather than leading proactively. In crisis management, timing and clarity are everything. Newsom's slow pivot, from firebrand to disciplinarian, only solidified perceptions of him as a reactive leader, not a decisive one. The credibility gap widened as commentators began questioning Newsom's fitness to hold higher office, with Maher emphasizing that presidential leadership requires more than charisma and progressive credentials.
Yeah, these are his own people, folks. Governor Newsom said the Democratic brand is toxic. He also says Democrats are too judgmental and that they need to mature. That name-calling is getting a lot of attention.
If Newsom couldn't manage civil disorder in his own backyard, how could he possibly confront national crises or international threats? The hypothetical posed in the video is chilling. Imagine an aggressive adversary testing U.S. resolve. Would Newsom fold under pressure, issue vague apologies, and scramble to clean up the aftermath? Maher suggests that leadership demands strength, decisiveness, and a willingness to act under fire, qualities he finds lacking in Newsom's track record. While some voters may be swayed by his polished image and rhetorical skill, the substance behind the style is what ultimately matters. In a nation craving stability and clear-headed leadership, Newsom's failure to meet the moment in California casts serious doubt on his capacity to lead the country. The chorus of disapproval doesn't end with Maher. Prominent figures like Mel Gibson and Bill O'Reilly have echoed concerns about Newsom's leadership, with particular emphasis on the failures surrounding the Los Angeles wildfires and the recent wave of civil unrest.
It's one thing to make noise, but you also have to make sense. And I think with this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground and not take cheap shots. I'm not looking to put a spoke in the wheel of their, or at least a crowbar in the spokes of their wheel to trip them up, to your point.
They argue that his administration has consistently failed to demonstrate the competence required to manage crises, and worse, that these failures have emboldened lawlessness and deteriorated public trust. The commentary paints a dire picture of California as a state in decline, plagued by soaring taxes, unaffordable housing, and rampant crime, all under Newsom's watch. For O'Reilly, the protests weren't organic expressions of discontent, but carefully orchestrated events supported by far-left groups. He even raises the specter of political manipulation, suggesting that Newsom or his allies may have used the protests as a platform to build leftist credibility in anticipation of a presidential run. If true, this would represent not just poor leadership, but a betrayal of public trust for personal gain. The comparison to other Democratic-led states further weakens Newsom's standing. In contrast to California's chaotic response to civil unrest, New York's leadership is highlighted as a model of effective crisis management. When unrest threatened to destabilize New York City, state officials acted swiftly and decisively, enforcing order and protecting property without hesitation. There was no ambiguity, no pandering, and no politically safe statements designed to appease both sides. This kind of leadership, Maher notes, is precisely what California lacked under Newsom. The governor's indecisiveness allowed miscreants to wreak havoc, creating an environment of fear and instability. In the face of mounting violence, a true leader doesn't equivocate, they act. By failing to immediately deploy the National Guard or support local law enforcement, Newsom revealed either a lack of concern or a troubling willingness to let chaos unfold. In either case, his inaction speaks volumes about his priorities and approach to governance. Maher then zooms out to assess the broader state of the Democratic Party, describing it as toxic and plagued by internal contradictions, with party favorability at historic lows, dropping from 29% to 27% in recent polls. The cracks are showing. Even former White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has reportedly exited the party, a move Maher interprets as a symptom of deeper dysfunction. According to Maher, performative politics, identity-driven narratives, and a growing disconnect from everyday voters are causing the party to implode from within. Newsom, though still standing, is emblematic of this dysfunction, a polished surface masking structural failure.
People suggest that cleaning up California streets could be part of a larger political strategy for you.
I think that's table stakes. I think that's just a foundational responsibility of anyone that gets into my position. That's the day job. It's not about some grand ambition, absolutely not.
For Maher, the issue is not merely about Newsom's potential presidential bid, but about what his leadership says about the direction of the Democratic Party. If the party continues to elevate leaders who prioritize ideology over impact, it risks alienating the very electorate it needs to win. Voters, he says, are looking for results, not rhetoric, and Newsom, in his current form, isn't delivering either. In closing, the video casts Newsom not only as a failed governor, but as a cautionary tale for national Democrats. While he may not have formally announced a 2028 presidential bid, his actions suggest someone laying the groundwork for higher office, from his increased media presence to launching a podcast aimed at broader political discourse. But the question remains, at what cost? If he's willing to play politics with public safety, embrace soft-on-crime policies, and dodge responsibility in moments of crisis, what kind of president would he be? Maher and his co-commentators argue that leadership is not about performance, it's about principle. And if Gavin Newsom represents the best Democrats have to offer, the party may be in deeper trouble than it realizes. The final message is stark. California's implosion under Newsom is not just a state-level issue, it's a warning to the rest of America. Electing leaders based on style rather than substance can have real devastating consequences, and the rest of the country would do well to take note before it's too late.